below zero. By the time the sun rises in this story, you will know exactly how our ancestors survived the harshest winters our species has ever faced. And if you drift off somewhere along the way, that is perfectly fine. That is what this is for. So settle in, get comfortable, let your shoulders sink into the bed, and let the day loosen its grip on you. There is nothing you need to remember from tonight. There is no test at the end. There is only a long, slow walk into the deep past, into a world of snow and firelight and quiet human persistence. Let us begin with the world itself, because the world of 20,000 years ago was not our world. This was the last glacial maximum, the deepest point of the most recent ice age. It reached its coldest stretch somewhere around 21,000 years ago, and for thousands of years on either side of that peak, the planet was locked in a long, hard winter. Across northern Europe and most of Canada, the ice did not come and go with the seasons. It simply stayed. Great sheets of glacial ice, in places more than 2 kilometers thick, pressed down on the land. 2 kilometers. If you stood at the foot of that ice wall and looked up, you would be looking at a cliff of frozen water taller than any building humans have ever made. So much of the world's water was trapped in those ice sheets that the oceans themselves had dropped. Sea levels sat roughly 120 meters lower than they do today. Coastlines we know simply did not exist. Britain was not an island. You could walk from France to England across a cold, dry plain. A wide bridge of land connected Siberia to Alaska, and animals and people moved across it without ever knowing they were crossing between continents. But here is the thing that surprises most people. The land where our band of humans lives tonight is not buried under ice. South of the great ice sheets stretched something else entirely, a vast, open, frozen grassland that scientists call the Mammoth Steppe. It ran almost unbroken from Spain in the west, across Central Europe, across Ukraine and southern Russia, across all of Siberia, and over that land bridge into Alaska and the Yukon. It was, by area, one of the largest single habitats that has ever existed on Earth. The Mammoth Steppe was bitterly cold, but it was also dry. Not much snow fell across great stretches of it, and the wind kept what snow there was swept thin across the ground. And because the snow stayed shallow, grass could survive. Tough, dry, frozen grasses, sedges, low herbs, dwarf willows hugging the ground. Nothing tall. Almost no trees for hundreds of kilometers at a time. Just an ocean of pale grass under an enormous sky. And on that grass lived giants. Woolly mammoths moved across the steppe in family herds, shaggy and patient, sweeping their curved tusks through the snow to uncover the grass beneath. Woolly rhinoceros grazed alongside them, two-horned and heavy-shouldered, wrapped in coats of thick reddish wool. There were steppe bison with horns wider than a man is tall, wild horses, stocky and thick-maned, in herds of hundreds, reindeer beyond counting, musk oxen standing in their patient defensive circles when the wind grew cruel, giant deer with antlers spanning 3.5 meters, and hunting all of them, cave lions larger than any lion alive today, packs of wolves, wolverines, and here and there the humans, because humans lived here too, not many of them. Spread across that entire immense grassland, there may have been only a few 100,000 people in the whole world. Small bands, usually somewhere between 15 and 30 people, separated from the next band by days of walking. They were people exactly like us. Anatomically, neurologically, in every way that matters, the people we are about to visit were fully modern humans. The same brain that is listening to this right now, the same kind of mind, the same capacity for love and worry and humor and boredom. If you could bring one of their infants forward in time and raise her today, she would do homework and complain about it. The only difference between them and us is everything around them. So now let us go down to them. Let us pick one band on one evening somewhere on the East European plain in what is now Ukraine, near a slow frozen river in the late afternoon of a midwinter day 20,000 years ago. The sun is already low. At this latitude in the heart of winter, daylight is a short visitor, perhaps 8 hours of pale light, and most of that light is thin and slanted and golden, the sun never climbing far above the horizon. The temperature in the middle of this day, the warmest it will be, was around 20 degrees below 0 Celsius. Tonight, under a clear sky, it will fall past -35, and the wind off the steppe will make the air feel colder still. And yet, as we come over a low rise above the river valley, we see something remarkable. Smoke. 2 or 3 thin lines of smoke rising from the valley floor, bending in the wind. And beneath the smoke, a cluster of rounded, dome-shaped structures hunched against the slope like sleeping animals. This is the winter camp. This is home. Walk down toward the camp with me, slowly, the dry snow squeaking under each step the way snow only squeaks when it is seriously cold. As we get closer, the domes resolve into something stranger and more wonderful than tents. They are built from bones, mammoth bones. This is one of the most extraordinary architectural traditions in human history, and it is not a guess. Archaeologists have excavated these dwellings at sites across Ukraine and Russia, and the most famous of them is a place called Mezhyrich, discovered in 1965 when a farmer digging a cellar struck a mammoth jawbone 2 meters down. At Mezhyrich, researchers uncovered the remains of several bone dwellings, and the numbers are staggering. A single hut used the bones of dozens of mammoths. One dwelling there incorporated 25 mammoth skulls arranged around its base, their broad foreheads turned outward to form a foundation ring. Another used 95 mammoth jawbones, stacked chin down in neat, interlocking columns, herringbone patterns of bone forming the lower walls. Long leg bones stood upright like posts. Curved tusks, some more than 3 meters long, were socketed together over the top to form the arches of the roof. Why bones? Because remember where we are. On the open steppe there are no trees, there is no timber to cut, but there are mammoths, and a mammoth skeleton is a building supply store. Some of these bones came from hunted animals, but many were almost certainly scavenged, gathered from the steppe where mammoths had died naturally, or pulled from the banks of rivers that concentrated old bones the way rivers do. A large mammoth skull can weigh over 100 kilograms. Hauling these across the frozen ground, organizing them, raising the frame, this was a serious construction project, the work of many people over weeks. These were not casual shelters. These were homes that families returned to, winter after winter. Over the bone framework, the builders stretched hides. Mammoth hide where they had it, but more often the sewn-together skins of horse and reindeer, hair turned outward, lashed down against the wind. Over and around the hide covering, they likely banked earth and sod, and as winter deepened, drifted snow piled against the walls and did something counterintuitive. It insulated them. Snow is full of trapped air, and trapped air holds warmth. The same cold that threatened them also wrapped their houses in a white blanket. The doorway is low and small, deliberately so, hung with a heavy flap of hide, and often angled away from the prevailing wind. You do not build a big grand entrance in a place like this. Every opening is a wound that lakes heat. Duck down now, push the hide flap aside, and step through into the dwelling, and feel what happens. The change is immediate and total. Outside, the air is a blade. Inside, the air is thick and warm and alive. It smells of wood smoke and bone smoke, of cured hides of people, of fat burning gently in stone lamps. After the white glare of the snow, the interior is dim, lit in soft orange. The space is perhaps 4 to 6 meters across, a single round room. The floor is packed earth, covered in places with hides. And in the center, ringed by stones, is the thing that everything else depends on: the fire. If this band has a single most precious possession, it is not a tool or a weapon or an ornament. It is this small, steady, carefully tended fire, and the knowledge of how to keep it. Let us talk about that fire, because surviving an ice age night is more than anything else the story of fuel. Here is the problem these people solved. A fire burns wood, but the steppe has almost no wood. There are dwarf willows and birches along the river, low shrubby things, and the band gathers them constantly, but brush like that burns fast and bright and is gone. You cannot feed a whole winter with twigs, so they burned something else. They burned bone. Fresh bone is full of fat. The skeleton of a large animal carries kilograms of grease in its structure, and once a fire is hot enough, bone catches and burns slowly with a strong, steady heat. At Ice Age sites across the steppe, archaeologists find hearths packed with crumbled, burned bone ash, far more bone than wood. The pattern is clear. Wood and brush were the kindling, the starter. Bone was the coal. The same animals that fed them and clothed them and housed them also, quite literally kept them warm. On the mammoth steppe, almost nothing was wasted, because waste was death. They also burned dried dung gathered in the warmer months, as steppe and tundra peoples have done for thousands of years since, and they rendered animal fat into portable fuel. Around the dwelling, set in small carved stone lamps, lumps of fat burn at the tip of a moss or juniper wick, each lamp throwing a small steady globe of light. We know these lamps well. Hundreds have been found across Ice Age Europe, simple cupped stones blackened by use. People carried lamps like these deep into caves like lascaux to paint by their light. Now the fire itself is never large. That surprises people too. We imagine roaring bonfires, but a roaring fire is a wasteful fire, devouring fuel and pushing people back from its heat. The hearth fire in this dwelling is modest, 1/2 meter across, banked low, managed constantly. The skill is not in making it big. The skill is in never, ever letting it die. Could they restart a fire from nothing? Yes. They had fire-making technology, striking sparks from flint against iron pyrite into carefully prepared tinder, dry shredded plant fiber, fungus, fat-soaked moss. But starting a fire from a spark, with numb fingers in deep cold, is slow and uncertain. Far better never to need to. So the fire is banked at night, the coals raked together and covered with ash so they smolder for hours, and someone always is half responsible for it, the way you might be half aware of a sleeping baby. We will come back to that, because it shapes the very rhythm of how these people sleep. While the fire settles, look around the dwelling, because the people are coming in now out of the dusk, and we should meet them. There are perhaps 8 or 9 people who sleep in this particular hut, one hearth group within the larger band. An older woman, gray-haired, whose hands are never still, twisting plant fiber into cordage even as she talks. Her daughter and her daughter's partner, a teenage boy on the edge of adulthood, all elbows and appetite, 2 younger children, an infant, swaddled against her mother in soft hide lined with down and moss. An older man with a stiff knee, the kind of injury we find healed in Ice Age skeletons, evidence that injured people were cared for, fed, and kept, sometimes for years, because in a band this small, every person is irreplaceable, and because they loved each other. We should not be shy about saying that. These were human beings. They grieved their dead, they decorated their children, they kept their elders alive. The archaeology says so over and over. Now look at what they are wearing, because clothing is the second great survival technology of the Ice Age, every bit as important as fire, and it is one we can speak about with real confidence. The single most important artifact here is small enough to lose in your pocket. It is the eyed needle, a fine sliver of bone or ivory, ground smooth, sharpened, with a tiny eye drilled through the thick end for thread. Eyed needles appear in the archaeological record well over 30,000 years ago, and by the time of our band, they are refined, beautiful tools, some as slim as the steel needles in a modern sewing kit. With an eyed needle and thread made of animal sinew, you can do something that changes everything. You can sew a seam that follows the shape of a body. You can make tailored, fitted clothing. And fitted clothing is the difference between life and death at -35. A loose draped hide lets the wind reach your skin. A fitted garment, sewn snug at the wrists and neck and ankles, traps a layer of warmed air against your body and keeps it there. We even have a kind of ghostly photograph of Ice Age clothing from a site called Sunghir near Vladimir in Russia, dating to around 34,000 years ago. There, people buried an adult man and 2 children with extraordinary care, and onto their funeral clothing they had sewn beads of mammoth ivory. Thousands of them. Roughly 3,000 beads on the man, and on the 2 children together, around 10,000 more. The clothing itself rotted away long ago, but the beads stayed exactly where the garments held them, and from those lines of beads, archaeologists can read the outfits like a pattern. Fitted trousers, a pullover tunic or parka, footwear, a cap, the whole tailored cold-weather kit, essentially the same brilliant design that Arctic peoples perfected and still use, fur layered against fur. Experimenters have estimated that a single one of those ivory beads took perhaps half an hour to an hour to carve and drill. Multiply that by 13,000 beads across those burials, and you get years of human labor sewn onto the clothes of people being laid in the earth. Whatever those beads meant, these were not people scraping by on the edge of brute existence. They had surplus enough for beauty. So picture our band dressed for this evening. Inner garments worn fur side in, soft against the skin, reindeer fawn and hare and fox. Outer parkas fur side out, hoods rimmed with wolverine or wolf fur because long guard hairs shed the frost from your breath. Mittens on cord so they cannot be dropped and lost in the snow, because a lost mitten out on the steppe is a lost hand. Boots of layered hide, stuffed with dried grass that is swapped out each evening and dried by the fire. An insole you grow fresh every day. Inside the warm dwelling, the heavy outer layers come off and hang from the bone framework, and people sit comfortable in their soft inner clothes. The grandmother is checking everyone's boots as they come in, turning them, pulling the damp grass out, setting it to dry. It is the sort of small, endless, unglamorous task that actually keeps people alive, and she has done it 10,000 times. Outside, the last hunters are coming home, and they have done well. Not a mammoth. Mammoth hunts were rare events, dangerous, probably communal, and possibly not even yearly. The daily bread of the steppe was smaller and more reliable. Today it is reindeer, 2 of them, taken at a river crossing, already butchered down into loads the hunters could carry, wrapped in their own hides. Food in this world is not casual. An adult working hard in this cold may need 4,000 calories a day, perhaps more, and most of it comes from animals, because in midwinter the plant world is locked away under snow. And that creates a problem that every cold climate hunting people has had to solve. Lean meat alone is not enough. A diet of pure lean protein can actually starve you. What the body craves and needs in the deep cold is fat. So watch what they prize from today's kill. The marrow bones, cracked open by the fire so the rich marrow can be eaten warm. The fat deposits from around the organs themselves, the liver and heart, dense with nutrients. The brain, the tongue, the fatty pads. The lean muscle meat matters too, of course, and much of it will be dried or frozen for later. But fat is the currency. Fat is wealth. And here the Ice Age hands these people one enormous gift in exchange for all its cruelty. The whole world is a freezer. Beneath the topsoil, the ground itself is permanently frozen, and the band digs storage pits down into that permafrost, lines them, fills them with meat, and caps them. Archaeologists find these pits clustered around the bone dwellings at Measureich and its sister sites, deep cold cellars dug 15,000 years before the refrigerator. A successful autumn hunt does not have to be eaten in a week. It can feed the dark months, drawn out of the ground portion by portion, as long as the wolverines do not find it first. Tonight, strips of reindeer meat are propped on sticks to roast at the edge of the fire, fat dripping and flaring. There is dried meat pounded together with rendered fat, and perhaps dried berries gathered in the brief summer, a dense, rich travel food that later peoples would call pemmican. There are roots gathered in autumn and frozen berries like little sour jewels. The smell fills the dwelling. The children are given the cracked marrow bones to work on, the Ice Age equivalent of being handed the mixing spoon to lick. Now the light outside is nearly gone. The sun set into the steppe like a coal sinking into ash, and the cold is tightening its grip on the valley. You can hear it, actually. As the temperature drops, the river ice booms and cracks, long groaning notes rolling up the valley, and now and then a tree down in the sheltered gully splits with a report like a snapped branch magnified 100 times, sap frozen and bursting the wood. To us, these would be alarming sounds. To the band, they are just the voice of a winter night, as familiar as traffic noise is to a city sleeper. Nobody looks up. The last people come in, the hide flap drops, and the household begins, slowly, deliciously, to wind down. This is a good moment to ask the question this whole night has been leading toward. How did they actually sleep? What was sleep like 20,000 years ago in the coldest world humans have ever inhabited? Start with the bed. There are no raised beds here, but there are real sleeping places, and they are carefully made. Around the perimeter of the dwelling, Against the bone and hide walls where the floor is driest, each sleeping spot is built up in layers. First, insulation from the ground, because the ground is the enemy at night. It will pull the heat out of a sleeping body far faster than the air will. So down first goes a thick mat of dried grass and brush, then stiff hides, hair side up, horse and bison. Over that, the soft bedding, reindeer hides, supple and dense. Reindeer hair is hollow, each strand a tiny tube of trapped air, which makes reindeer hide one of the warmest natural materials on Earth. Arctic travelers were still choosing reindeer sleeping skins over manufactured gear well into the modern era. And then the blankets. Large sewn covers of fur, fox and hare and wolf, big enough to share. Because that is the next thing to understand about Ice Age sleep. Nobody sleeps alone. Sleeping together in a heap, in pairs, children tucked between adults, the baby in the warm hollow of her mother's body, was not just affection, though it was that too. It was thermodynamics. Two people under one fur cover lose far less heat than two people under two covers. A family sleeping in contact is a single warm organism with a fraction of the exposed surface. Every cold climate people in recorded history has slept this way, and there is no reason to think their Ice Age ancestors were any different. The private bedroom, the solitary sleeper in a sealed dark room, is a very, very recent invention. For almost the whole human story, sleep sounded like other people breathing. So picture the dwelling now. The fire banked low in its ring of stones, coals pulsing under their gray coat of ash. One small fat lamp left burning. The big fur covers spread, and the family folding themselves into their places one by one, the children first, complaining and then suddenly asleep in the way children fall asleep, like a door closing. The old man easing his stiff knee down with a sigh. Murmured conversation getting slower and softer and farther apart. Here is something else about their sleep that may be different from yours, and it is worth knowing because it might actually comfort you at 3 in the morning sometime. People in the deep past almost certainly did not sleep in one single unbroken block, the way we are told we should. The nights here are enormously long, 14, 15, 16 hours of darkness in midwinter, far more darkness than any human needs to fill with sleep. Historians studying later pre-industrial Europe found constant casual references to a first sleep and a second sleep. Two stretches of rest separated by an hour or so of quiet wakefulness in the middle of the night, a time when people lay warm, thought, talked softly, tended fires, said prayers, and then drifted down again. And studies of modern hunter-gatherer and traditional communities show much the same easy, flexible relationship with the night. Sleep comes a few hours after dark, runs in its own rhythm, breaks and resumes, and nobody panics about it. So when someone in this dwelling surfaces in the black middle of the night, eyes open, mind quietly turning. They do not lie there worrying that something is wrong with them. Waking in the night is not a malfunction. It is one of the oldest human experiences there is. They listen to the wind for a while. They check the breathing heap of their family. Perhaps they slide out from under the furs, pad to the hearth, and do the most important chore of the entire night. They feed the fire. All night long, in shifts that are never formally assigned, but always somehow covered, someone tends that fire. A few bones laid on, ash raked, coals nudged together. In a band of 15 to 30 people, natural variation does the scheduling for them. Some people are early risers, some are night owls. The old sleep lightly and the young sleep like stones, and the result, as researchers studying the Hadza people of Tanzania noticed in our own time, is that across a whole camp, almost every minute of the night, somebody happens to be awake. The camp has no guard rota, and yet the camp is never unguarded. Biologists have suggested this mix of sleep schedules may be one of the quiet reasons our species made it at all, a sentinel system assembled by accident out of grandmothers who wake at 4 in the morning. And there are things to be sentinel about. Step outside the hide flap for one moment, just one breath, into the night, and you will understand. The cold out here is not weather, it is a presence. It seizes the breath in your nose, freezes your eyelashes together at the blink, finds the one gap at your wrist. Overhead, with no other light for 1,000 kilometers, the sky is ferocious with stars, the great river of the Milky Way pouring overhead, the winter constellations burning, the same stars in very nearly the same patterns that you can see tonight. These people knew that sky the way you know your own street. And some nights, this far north, green light moves across it in slow curtains, the aurora rippling silently over the steppe while the snow glows faintly back. Far off, a wolf howls and another answers, and the sound carries forever in the frozen air. The horses down the valley will be standing close together, tails to the wind. Somewhere a cave lion is moving like a piece of the dark. The dwelling behind you, glowing faintly at its seams, smoke rising from its vent into the stars, is one small warm cell of life in all of that immensity. Now duck back inside, into the smell of smoke and fur and family, and let the flap fall. Feel how good it is, how deeply, anciently good, to come in from the cold to a warm sleeping place. Whatever else separates you from these people, you share that exact feeling, unchanged across 20,000 years. Before everyone in the dwelling is fully asleep, there is one more part of the evening we should not skip, because it is the part that makes them most recognizably us. The hours between dinner and deep night were almost certainly the social heart of the Ice Age day. Anthropologists who recorded conversations among modern hunter-gatherer peoples found a striking pattern. Daytime talk is mostly practical, plans, complaints, logistics, gossip. But after dark, by firelight, the proportions flip. Night talk turns to stories, to the old days, to absent friends, to spirits, to the doings of animals and ancestors, to things that make people laugh and things that make them quiet. Firelight seems to open a different room in the human mind. There is no reason to think it was different here, and every reason to think this is where it began. So tonight, before sleep, the old woman talks. Maybe it is the story of the winter the river did not freeze. Maybe it is the one about her grandmother walking for 6 days to find another band when the hunting failed, and how she was received and fed, because the bands of the steppe were threads in one net, trading flint and amber and shells across hundreds of kilometers, marrying across distances, keeping the doors of friendship open precisely for the terrible years. Archaeologists find seashells from the Black Sea coast at inland camps hundreds of kilometers from any shore. Those shells are friendship made visible. They are insurance worn as jewelry. The children have heard the story before. That is the point of stories like this. You hear them until they are part of how your mind is built. And these evenings had more than words. From caves in what is now southern Germany, at sites like Hohl Fels, archaeologists have recovered flutes more than 35,000 years old, made from the hollow wing bones of vultures and from laboriously joined pieces of mammoth ivory, with finger holes spaced for a scale. Someone has made playable replicas, and they sound bright and haunting and surprisingly familiar. Music is at least as old as these bone houses, and probably far, far older. So perhaps tonight there is a flute, or just a mother humming against her baby's head, the oldest song there is, the one with no words and no beginning. There is art in this dwelling too, if you look. Small carved figures of mammoth ivory, animals caught mid-stride, beads on every child. Red ochre, the iron-rich pigment these people loved, marking hides and skin and the bones of the house itself. At a camp called Dolní Věstonice, in what is now the Czech Republic, people of this same broad Ice Age world were pressing clay figures and firing them hard in kilns 26,000 years ago, the oldest fired ceramics we know of, thousands of years before pottery was used for anything as practical as a bowl. The first ceramics were not containers, they were sculptures. Beauty came before convenience. Hold onto that thought as you get sleepy. The deepest ice age, the hardest winter our species ever endured, and they spent precious fat in their lamps to carve animals, string beads, and play the flute. Survival was never only survival. Before the household goes fully quiet, the teenage boy, who is not sleepy yet because teenagers have never once in human history been sleepy at the correct time, asks the hunters to tell about the day. And because we were not there this afternoon, let us hear it too, told low and slow by the fire. The reindeer were taken at the river crossing, and that one sentence holds a whole technology of knowledge. The band did not wander the steppe hoping to bump into animals. They knew the land the way you know your own home in the dark. They knew that reindeer move along habitual paths, that herds funnel at certain bends of the river where the banks are low, that in a hard wind the animals drift into the lee of the valley. The hunters were not searching today. They were waiting in a place their grandfathers had waited downwind, white-gray firs against white-gray snow, still as stones, for most of the short day. And when the moment came, they used one of the great inventions of the age. Not the spear alone, but the spear thrower. A flat length of antler or wood, about as long as your forearm, with a hook at one end that seats the butt of a light spear, a dart really. The thrower works as an extension of the hunter's arm, a lever that whips the dart away at speeds and distances no bare arm can match. With it, a skilled hunter can strike an animal from 30, 40 meters and more, far outside the range at which the reindeer's nerve breaks and the herd explodes into flight. Spear throwers from this world survive, and here is the detail worth falling asleep on. Many of them are carved, decorated. There are spear throwers from Ice Age France shaped into leaping horses and birds and young ibex, tools a person's life depended on, finished with the care we give to art, because to their makers there does not seem to have been a hard line between the two. The dart that brought down the first reindeer was tipped with flint, and that flint has its own quiet story. It did not come from this valley. Good flint, the glassy, predictable kind that flakes true, occurs only in certain places, and bands carried it, traded it, and treasured it across enormous distances. A nodule of fine flint arriving in camp was wealth arriving, and nothing of it was wasted. The napper. And in this band, the napper of real skill is the mother of the two younger children, works it down with practiced strikes, antler hammer against stone, each blow peeling off a long, elegant blade, until one fist-sized core has yielded meters of cutting edge. If you have never seen flint napping, it is worth knowing that a freshly struck flint blade is sharper than a steel scalpel. Surgeons in the modern era have, on occasion, actually used obsidian and flint blades for fine work. So when you picture these people, do not picture them soaring at heights with crude rocks. Picture a toolkit of dozens of specialized blades, knives, scrapers, borers, barons for carving bone and ivory, each one fitted to a task, hafted into handles of antler and wood with sinew lashings, and a glue these people cooked themselves, birch tar and pine resin mixed with charcoal and beeswax, an industrial adhesive made over a campfire. The napping is done in the evenings, by the fire, and it has a sound, a bright glassy tick, 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 that would have been one of the signature sounds of human camps for 1,000,000 years. The children in this dwelling have fallen asleep to that sound all their lives. Perhaps it can work on you too. Tick, a pause while the work is turned and considered. Tick. There is another evening chore happening at the edge of the firelight, so ordinary that it would be easy to miss, and yet whole expeditions in later centuries died for ignoring it. The drinking water is being made. Because here is a strange truth about the deepest cold. It is a desert. Everything is water and none of it is drinkable, and eating snow is a slow disaster, chilling the body from the inside, spending more warmth than any thirst is worth. So water must be made, with fuel every single day. A hide-lined basket or a section of gut holds snow and chunks of river ice, and hot stones from the hearth go in, one after another, hissing, until there is water, smoky and faintly mineral, kept near the fire so it does not simply freeze again. The old woman makes sure everyone drinks before sleep, especially the children, because she knows, in the practical way of people who have never heard the word dehydration, that the cold dries a body out, that thirsty people weaken, and that weak is one thing nobody on the steppe can afford to be in February. She has other knowledge of that kind, which moss packs a wound, which willow bark chewed dulls a throbbing tooth, and yes, willow bark truly does contain the compound from which aspirin was later derived. How to spot frostbite when it is still white and waxy and savable, and to warm its skin to skin, never by the fire, never rubbed with snow. How to splint a broken arm with hide and bone so it heals straight, and we know arms healed straight because we have found them knitted bones in Ice Age skeletons, the signature of people who were nursed, fed, and given time. Medicine is older than history. Most of it was grandmothers. And what about the children themselves, the two who are now finally, truly asleep in the middle of the fur pile? What was it to be a child here? Mostly it was to be loved in a crowd. A child of the band has one mother but many laps, a dozen people who will feed her, carry her, scold her, and teach her, and the teaching almost never looks like teaching. It looks like play. The children of the steppe play at exactly what you would guess. They have small bows and toy darts. They have dolls of hide and carved ivory. They track mice and ptarmigan around the camp with deadly seriousness. They are given real small tasks young, fetching bone for the fire, turning the drying grass in the boots, holding sinew taut while an adult sews, and the line between chores and games is left deliberately blurry. By 6, a child can name every animal track in the snow. By 10, she can read the river ice, nap a passable blade, and sew a seam that holds. By 15, the boy who is only now falling asleep will stand at the river crossing with a spear thrower of his own. There was time for all this teaching, and that is something worth saying plainly, because we tend to imagine the deep past as ceaseless, desperate toil. The evidence and the experience of every hunting people studied since suggests something different. Hard days, real danger, terrible years, yes. But also, in a normal stretch, hours of every day that belong to talk, craft, games, and rest. The mountain of beadwork at Sung the flutes, the carved spear throwers, all of it is time made visible. You do not get 13,000 carved beads out of people who have no afternoons. Somewhere outside, in the dark beyond the dwellings, there may be one more set of ears listening to the wolves, And this is one of the loveliest open questions of the whole Ice Age. Did this band have dogs? It is genuinely possible. The bones tell us that by somewhere in this broad window of the Ice Age, certain wolves had begun to change, their skulls shortening, their frames lightening, drifting towards something new. Scientists still argue about exactly when and where the first true dogs appear, with estimates running from around 15,000 to perhaps more than 30,000 years ago. But the heart of the story is agreed. Before we tamed any other animal, before sheep, before cattle, before horses, before we farmed a single seed, while the ice was still here, some wolves and some humans worked out an arrangement. Scraps and warmth from our side, warning and company from theirs. So allow the picture, since the science allows it. At the edge of this camp, a shaggy, wolf-faced shape lies curled nose under tail in the snow, perfectly comfortable at 35 below in a way no human ever could be. When the wild wolves howl down the valley, it lifts its head. It does not answer them. It has made its choice. Its great-great-grandchildren, 10,000 generations along, will sleep on the foot of beds in heated houses, dreaming, paws twitching, of exactly this. The fire ticks. The wind leans on the hide walls and gives up. Since nearly everyone is asleep now, we can talk quietly about the things this band believes they're in the dark, the things behind their closed eyes. We cannot interview them, of course, but they left clues. They buried their dead with tenderness and treasure, with ochre and beads and tools for some kind of elsewhere, and you do not give grave gifts to someone you believe is simply gone. They painted. In the deep caves far to the west of here, by the light of those little fat lamps, lions and horses and rhinos and great bulls, hundreds of meters from daylight, in places so hard to reach that getting there must have been the point. They carved figures of women, of animals, of beings half lion and half man, which means that at least 35,000 years ago, somebody could imagine a thing that does not exist and thought it mattered enough to spend 100 hours of carving on. Whatever the specifics of their beliefs, and the specifics are lost, the shape of them is familiar. The animals were persons of a kind. The dead were somewhere. The world was thick with meaning, and the long winter night was full of stories that explained it. The old woman, drifting off, believes that the river has a temper and the mammoths have memories, and her own mother is, in some manner she has never needed to define, still nearby. You may believe very different things, but you and she both lie down in the dark inside a story that makes the dark feel inhabited, and that, too, is a piece of equipment for surviving winters. If you stayed with this band past tonight, you would see the rest of the great wheel their year turns on. So let us spin it once, gently, the way you might spin a globe. This bone house camp is the winter anchor, the deep keel of their year. They settle into it as the days shorten, live close and stored up through the heart of the cold. The season of sewing and carving and stories, the season we are visiting now. Then, as the light comes back and the snow rots and the river groans and breaks, the year opens like a hand. Spring means the reindeer moving and the band moves with them. Summer is the light season, the traveling season, hide tents instead of bone houses, the steppe suddenly green and roaring with life, birds in clouds on the thaw lakes, the brief astonishing crop of berries and roots and eggs, and the great gatherings when several bands meet at the rich places, and there is trade and gossip a year deep, and games, and the young people of different bands look at each other with intent, which is how the net of kinship across the steppe reweaves itself every year. Autumn is the urgent season, the season of the big hunts and the filling of the permafrost pits, the whole band working like a single animal to bank the winter's calories before the winter arrives to ask for them. And then the days shorten, and they come back here to the valley, to the bone houses waiting under their drifted snow, and repair the hides, and light the fires in the old hearths, and the wheel comes around again to a night exactly like this one. They do not experience this as monotony. The year is not a treadmill to them. It is a shape, a known and trusted shape, the way the verses of a song are a shape. Winter is the verse they are inside now. It always ends. It has always ended. The proof is everyone in this dwelling, every one of whom is a person winter has so far failed to keep. There is one more thing worth marveling at before we let the night carry everyone away, and it is not made of bone or flint. It is the bodies under the furs themselves, because the human body, given time, meets the cold halfway. These people are not superhuman. Their skin freezes at the same temperature yours does, but they are deeply, thoroughly acclimatized in ways science has measured in cold climate peoples ever since. Spend a lifetime in cold, and the body learns. The blood vessels in the hands learn a trick called the hunting response, clamping down to save heat, and then every few minutes, flushing warm blood back out to the fingers so they stay nimble. The reason an experienced hand can work sinew and flint in air that would turn yours to wood. The body lays in more of a special heat-making tissue, brown fat, which burns calories not for movement but purely for warmth, a small internal hearth. Shivering itself becomes efficient. Sleep is possible at temperatures that would keep an unacclimatized person awake and miserable all night. None of this is legend. Researchers found that traditional peoples from the Kalahari to Tierra del Fuego to the Arctic coast could rest and sleep through cold that put visiting scientists into chattering misery, and the visitors' bodies, given weeks, began to learn the same lessons. And beyond the body, there is the deeper inheritance. Every person in this dwelling runs a metabolic engine tuned by hundreds of generations of winters, hearts and blood and appetite all shaped by the cold. And some of that shaping is in you. Not all of us descend from this particular steppe, but all of us descend from people who, somewhere in some climate, were tempered by hard seasons and passed the temper down. The comfort you feel right now, warm under your own covers, is sweeter than it strictly needs to be. That sweetness is old. It is the body's memory of nights like this one, paying out its reward for being, at last, warm. The old woman is the last adult awake, as she usually is, and since the boy asked for stories earlier, let her have one final one, the one she tells only rarely in the smallest voice, the one about the winter that almost won. It was when she was a girl, younger than the boy is now. The autumn hunts had failed. The reindeer had shifted their crossing far to the east for reasons no one ever learned, and the pits that should have been full went into the dark months half empty. She remembers the taste of that winter, hide glue and bone broth boiled twice, the marrow of bones already cracked once and saved. She remembers the adults growing quiet, and the precise rationing, and the day her grandfather decided, and the band rose out of its weakness and walked. They walked 6 days south along the frozen river, carrying the children and the fire, sleeping in snow shelters cut with antler picks. Toward the band, their shells and beads and marriages had bound them to for 3 generations. And she remembers cresting the last rise at dusk and seeing the smoke, and the dogs, if dogs they were, announcing them, and the people of that camp coming out, and what happened next, which is the entire point of the story. They were fed. No negotiation, no debt spoken aloud, no hesitation that a child's eye could see. The 2 bands folded together for the rest of that winter, crowded and short-rationed and alive, and when the spring came her people walked home and restocked their pits, and some years later, when the wheel turned the other way and the southern band's autumn failed, they came north along the same river and were fed in their turn. That is what the seashells from the far Black Sea coast were really for, she tells the dark, in case the dark is listening. That is why you are polite at the summer gatherings and generous when you can least afford it. The net is the food you cannot see. The steppe is too big and too cruel for any one band alone, and so no band is alone. People, in the end, were each other's deepest storage pit, the one the wolverines could never raid. She is asleep before she finishes the thought, which is fine. Everyone in the dwelling already knows the ending. Now the dwelling is truly settling. Let us slow down with it. The talk has stopped. The lamp has been pinched out, and the only light is the dull red breathing of the banked coals. Listen to the inventory of the night. The wind, working at the hide covering, finding nothing. The faint tick and shift of the bone frame as the temperature falls, a sound this family finds as reassuring as you find the hum of a furnace. The slow respiration of 8 sleeping people layered together, out of rhythm and then briefly, accidentally in rhythm. The infant making small sounds and being settled without anyone fully waking. Outside, muffled by snow, the immense silence of the steppe, a silence so complete it has a texture. The old man surfaces near the middle of the night, as he always does. He lies still for a while in the warmth, listening, the way we said people of the old world did, unhurried, unworried. Then he eases up, puts 2 cracked bones and a knot of willow on the coals, watches the small flames find them, and warms his hands. Through the smoke vent above him, he can see a single star. He thinks about nothing in particular, which after 70 winters he has earned. Then he goes back under the firs beside his family, and the fire keeps its small heart beating in the center of the house, and the night goes on. The boy, it turns out, is not quite asleep after all. He has been lying with his eyes closed, doing what people his age have always done in the dark, which is thinking about the future. And the future he is thinking about has a shape, the biggest shape there is. Someday, perhaps next autumn, perhaps the one after, he will stand with the men and women of 3 bands together, and they will hunt a mammoth. So while he turns it over in his mind, half thought and half dream, let us turn it over too, the way the band remembers it, because there are people in this camp who were there for the last one 4 winters ago, and the story has been told so many times it has worn smooth, like a pebble. A mammoth hunt was never an ordinary day's work. Understand the animal first. A full-grown woolly mammoth stood 3 meters and more at the shoulder and weighed as much as 80 people. It wore a hand's depth of fat under its skin, a dense undercoat beneath a coarse outer coat of hair that hung nearly to the ground, and it carried its great curved tusks not as ornaments, but as tools and weapons it knew how to use. It feared almost nothing on the steppe, and it was intelligent, and it lived in families that defended each other. You did not simply walk up to such an animal. Hunting one was closer to a military campaign than to a hunt, and bands almost certainly joined together for it. The way they joined for the summer gatherings, kin calling in kin. The story the band tells goes like this. Scouts watched the family of mammoths for days, learning them, until they knew the old matriarch's habits and the young bull who strayed. The hunters chose the ground, a place where the river bluff pinched the herd's path, soft, deep snow on one side, the drop on the other. They waited for the wind to agree. And then, with fire and noise and thrown darts from the spear throwers, dozens of people moving as one animal themselves. They cut the young bull away from the others and pressed him into the deep drift where his weight betrayed him, where the snow that a reindeer dances over swallowed him to the belly. It was dangerous even then. It was dangerous until the very end. An old man of the southern band carried a crooked arm from a mammoth hunt all his life, and carried it, by all accounts, rather proudly. What followed the kill was almost the larger labor. Days of butchery in the cold, every band's hands working. Sledges of hide heaped with meat and fat hauled back along the frozen river. The pits filled. The great bones themselves cleaned and stacked and dragged home over the snow. Because remember, bones are houses here, bones are firewood, bones are needles and flutes, and the small carved animals the children carry. One animal became winter security and building material and tools and beads for 100 people. Then there was, by every parallel we know from hunting peoples since, a feast, and not a casual one, 3 bands together in midwinter plenty, the closest thing the steppe had to a festival, songs and fat-rich food, and the retelling already beginning while the meat was still warm. And almost certainly something more solemn folded in with the joy, some acknowledgment made to the animal itself, because peoples who live by hunting, everywhere we have ever been able to ask them, do not regard the animals they kill with indifference. The mammoth fed them, housed them, warmed them, and walked through their carvings and surely their stories. You do not paint your food on cave walls for 30,000 years out of mere appetite. The boy's breathing has gone long and slow now. In his dream, the wind is right, and his arm does not shake. Let him have it. Every hunter in this dwelling had that dream once, at his age, in this same firelight. And what of the animals themselves, out there right now, in the night the band is sleeping through? It is worth one slow look around the dark valley, because the steppe does not stop when the people sleep. It simply changes shifts. The mammoth family, the scouts know best, is standing in the lee of the bluff 2 valleys north, grouped close. The calf in the middle of the warmth the great bodies make together. Mammoths likely slept little and lightly, as their elephant cousins do, dozing on their feet through the deep, cold hours. The snow settles on their backs and does not melt, which tells you how well that famous coat worked. The animal so insulated that its own heat never reached the surface. The horses are in the open, where horses always choose to be, backs to the wind, heads low, in a herd so tight it has one outline. The reindeer are pouring craters in the snow even now, even at night, because reindeer barely sleep in any way we would recognize, grazing and resting in odd patient cycles through the dark, and they can afford to, because almost nothing wants to argue with a herd that size in the open. The ptarmigan have done the cleverest thing of all. They have flown straight into the soft snowbanks and let the snow close over them, sleeping in little hidden burrows of their own body heat, invisible, insulated, safe, until they burst out at dawn like the ground exploding into birds. And the hunters of the night are working. A fox is mousing along the river terrace, head cocked, listening through 1/2 meter of snow for a heartbeat the size of a thumb, then leaping, that high diving leap, punching down through the crust. An owl the color of the moon drifts over the willow flats without one sound. Far off, the wolves that howled earlier have gone quiet, which means they are traveling, trotting their effortless single file along the packed wind crust, covering in one night distances that would take the band 3 days. All of it is happening out there in the dark, the whole vast economy of the steppe running on through the cold, while the bone houses by the river hold their small pools of human warmth, and nobody inside them stirs. The night does not need to be watched to go on working. It manages itself. It always has. Since we are traveling tonight anyway, 20,000 years from home, let us make one more journey inside the journey, because far to the west of this valley, weeks and weeks of walking, in the limestone country of what is now France and Spain, People of this same Ice Age world are doing something in the dark that still stops the human heart. They are painting the caves. You have probably seen photographs of it, Lascaux, Chauvet, Altamira. The great bulls and the running horses and the lions drawn mid-hunt. But photographs make it seem like decoration, and it was never decoration, because of one detail the photographs cannot carry: the location. These paintings are not at the cave mouths where people lived and the daylight reached. They are deep inside the earth, hundreds of meters along passages that pinch and twist and drop, places you must crawl to, places with no light at all ever, except the light you bring. So picture how it actually happened, because every element of it is something we have already seen tonight in the Bone House. A few people go in, carrying the little stone lamps, the same lamps, burning the same animal fat, each one throwing its small trembling globe of light a few meters into a darkness that has never once been disturbed by the sun. They carry pigments, the red and yellow ochres, the black of charcoal and manganese, ground fine and mixed with fat and water. They walk and crawl and climb, sometimes for an hour, into the silence of the mountain, to a chosen wall. And then by lamplight from memory, they paint animals so alive that the first modern people to see them refused to believe they were ancient. Horses with soft blowing muzzles, bison turning to look back, whole prides of lions drawn with a confidence of line that working artists today openly envy. They used the rock itself, letting a bulge of stone become a shoulder, a crack become a back, so that in moving lamplight, and this must have been the point, in moving lamplight the animals stir. The flame flickers and the herd breathes. We do not know what it meant. We genuinely do not, and it is honest to say so. Hunting magic, teaching, ceremony, vision, memory, story, all have been argued, and the caves keep their counsel. But here is one human detail to carry towards sleep. Among the painted animals, again and again, the people left their hands. They placed a palm against the cold rock and blue pigment over it, leaving a stencil, a hand outlined in red or black, fingers spread. Men's hands, women's hands, and small hands, children's hands, lifted up the walls where a child must have been carried. It is the oldest signature there is, and the message could not be plainer if it were written in any language on earth. I was here. We were here. The paint on some of those walls was applied over spans of hundreds, even thousands of years, generation after generation returning to the same deep rooms, adding, retouching, honoring. Whatever the caves were, they were kept. And tonight, while our band sleeps by its frozen river, the lamps are lit in some western cave, and somewhere in the dark a wall of horses is breathing. Come back now, the whole way back, east across the sleeping steppe, over the frozen rivers one by one, to our valley, our camp, our cluster of bone houses under the stars. And before you slip back inside, take one slow walk around the sleeping camp, the way the old man sometimes does on nights when his knee will not let him lie still. There is no danger in it. The dogs, if dogs they are, know your smell by now. There are 4 dwellings here, dark mounds in the snow, each one breathing its thin rope of smoke. The one nearest the river belongs to the band's best fisher and her family, and outside it, leaned against the bone wall, you can see the tools of her trade glinting with frost, the barbed harpoon points of carved antler, the gorges and hooks, because the river feeds this band too. Even in winter she keeps holes opened in the ice, and the children check them like presents. The next dwelling is the largest, and it houses, among others, the man the band would point to if you asked who leads them, though they would laugh a little at the question, because leadership here is not a throne, it is a reputation. He leads the way the most experienced person on any team leads, by being right often enough that people ask him first. In a band this size, everyone's opinion is heard around the fire. Decisions are mostly talked into existence, and a leader who began ordering people about would discover very quickly that he was merely a man walking in front of nobody. The steppe keeps people humble. The steppe is the only real chief. The third dwelling is quietest. An old woman died there at the start of this winter, the grandmother of that hearth, in her sleep, in her own furs, which is the death everyone here hopes for. They buried her in the way of their people, in a grave dug with antler picks into the hard ground, wearing her beads, dusted with red ochre, her bone needle case beside her hand, because whatever waits a person should not arrive without her tools. Her family still sometimes sets a little fat to burn for her in the evening. Grief is not modern. The first thing we ever built for the dead was a fire. And the fourth dwelling is the one you know, the one with our family in it, the boy dreaming his mammoth, the old man, the grandmother, the baby. Stand a moment in the middle of the sleeping camp, in the enormous night, and feel the thing the whole camp is. 30 people, 4 fires, 1 net of kinship and stories and stored fat and sewn fur, holding quietly against the deepest cold this planet has thrown at our species. It does not look like much from out here. It was everything. It was the whole human world, and it was enough. In the deepest part of the night, when even the fire seems to be sleeping with one eye open, it is a good time for the longest story of all, the one nobody in the camp knows they are part of, the story of how human beings came to be here at all on a frozen steppe 20,000 years ago, an impossibly long way from where our kind began, because we began in warmth. Our species was born in Africa, shaped by sun and savanna, a tropical animal in every line of its body, long-limbed for shedding heat, nearly hairless, built to sweat. By any sensible reading of that body, the mammoth steppe in midwinter should be as close to us as the bottom of the sea. A naked human on this snow tonight would have, at most, a few hours. And yet, beginning somewhere around 70 to 60,000 years ago, bands of those tropical animals walked out of Africa and kept walking. A few kilometers of new range in a generation, a valley further, a river further, no one ever aware of being on a journey at all. And as they spread north, they did something no other animal has ever done. Where every other species had to wait for its body to change, for thicker coats and shorter ears and deeper fat, evolving over hundreds of thousands of years, humans changed their equipment instead. The needle instead of the pelt, the fire instead of the blubber, the bone house instead of the burrow, the grandmother's knowledge instead of instinct. We did not adapt to the cold, we packed for it. By 45,000 years ago, there were people above the Arctic Circle in Siberia, leaving butchered mammoth bones in the polar twilight. People crossed open ocean to Australia. People filled Europe while the Neanderthals, who had owned its winters for 250,000 years, slowly faded, leaving each of us a few of their genes as a parting gift, some of which, the scientists tell us, are genes that helped with cold and with sickness, the old winter keepers' last contribution to the newcomers. And when the last glacial maximum clamped down, the deepest cold of the whole age, the time of our band, humans did retreat from some of the very worst country, pulling back into refuges, but they did not leave. They held the steppe. They are holding it tonight in this valley. Under these firs, every person in this dwelling is the leading edge of that 60,000-year walk, and not one of them knows it. The grandmother thinks her people have always lived along this river, more or less, give or take her grandmother's stories. She is wrong by a continent and right about everything that matters, because the walk was never the point. The fire at the end of each day's walk was the point. There were perhaps 2,500 generations of those fires between Africa and this hearth. There have been only about 800 between this hearth and you. Near the smoke vent, the stars have wheeled a long way since dark, and since someone in this camp is always half awake to see them, the band knows the night sky as a clock, a calendar, and a map, and that knowledge is worth one drowsy look upward before we let the night close. They do not have our constellations, but they certainly have constellations, because every culture ever met has drawn pictures in those same stars, and there are tantalizing hints traced by folklorists that a few star stories may be almost unimaginably old. The cluster we call the Pleiades, that little knot of sisters the band can see tonight through the vent, is told of as a group of sisters, often 7, often with one lost or hidden, in cultures from Greece to Australia to North America, peoples separated by oceans and tens of thousands of years. Some researchers suspect the story traveled with us, out of the deep past, perhaps out of the Ice Age itself, handed down beside fires like this one for so long that it crossed into every branch of the human family. It may be the oldest story still being told. The grandmother knows a version, so in all likelihood do you. The watcher tonight, the fisher's husband, who likes the cold hours, reads the sky without effort. The great bare shape circling the unmoving star tells him how far along the night is. The place on the horizon, where certain stars now rise tells him how deep in the winter they are, and that the days, though no one can feel it yet, have already begun to lengthen. The moon, 3 days past full, lays a blue-gray light on the snow so bright he could track a fox by it. People who live under the open sky are never lost in time the way a person can be lost at 3 in the morning in a dark bedroom. The night tells them constantly, gently, exactly where they are. It is past the middle now, the sky says. The deepest cold is here, and it is ordinary, and it is already passing. Morning is on schedule. He puts a last bone on the coals of his own hearth, and the camp sails on through the dark, crewed by its one calm sailor. Inside our dwelling, in the small hours, the baby wakes, as babies have always done and will always do, indifferent to ice ages. And what happens next has not changed in 20,000 years, not in one detail. Her mother, without truly waking, gathers her in, and the baby feeds, and the small sounds of it are absorbed by the furs and the sleepers, and nobody else stirs. It is worth pausing on her, the youngest person on this stretch of the steppe, because an ice age infancy was, in its own way, a luxurious thing. She is never apart from a warm body day or night. By day she rides against her mother or her aunt or her grandmother in a soft hide carrier lined with the downiest furs, with dried moss and shredded soft plant matter packed around her. The ice-aged diaper, changed and tossed and endlessly replaced, a system Arctic mothers were still using in living memory because it works beautifully. She is fed when she likes, held when she cries, passed lap to lap around the fire in the evenings like something precious, because she is. In a band of 30, a baby is not one family's project. She is everyone's stake in the future, and she will not be able to walk 10 steps in this camp for her whole childhood without crossing someone who would die for her. Her mother, half asleep, hums 2 notes against the small head. The baby's eyes are already closed again. Hold that picture, the single warmest point in 1,000 frozen kilometers, the exact center of the human world. And all around her, the sleepers are dreaming. We can say that with complete confidence, because dreaming is older than our species, older than fire, older than almost everything else in this story. So allow yourself drowsily to wonder what moves behind those flickering eyelids tonight. The boy, we know, is hunting his mammoth, his arm steady, the wind right. The fisher is dreaming in green of the summer river, open and loud and full. The grandmother dreams of people, as the old mostly do, of her mother's hands doing some task she cannot quite see, of voices from camps that no longer exist anywhere except in the country behind her eyes, where nothing is ever lost. The old man dreams he is walking without the stiffness in his knee, walking easily over spring tundra towards something pleasant he never quite reaches, and his sleeping face is content, because in the dream the walking itself is the pleasant thing. When they wake, they will tell some of these dreams around the morning fire, and the band will listen seriously, because in their world dreams may be visits or warnings or simply news from the other country, and even we, who explain dreams differently, still do exactly what they do. We wake, and we reach for someone, and we say, "I had the strangest dream." 20,000 years, and the first sentence of the morning has not changed. Now comes the hour the watchers all know, the hour that has a different quality from every other, the hour just before dawn. It is the coldest of the whole night. The ground has been radiating its warmth into the clear sky since sunset, and now at the end of the long dark, the steppe reaches its lowest ebb, -40, perhaps colder in the hollows, the kind of cold where thrown water crackles into ice before it lands, where the air itself seems thinner and the starlight harder. And it is also, strangely, the stillest and most peaceful hour. The wind very often dies at this turning of the night, as if the world were holding its breath. The wolves have laid up. The foxes are denned. Even the river ice has said everything it has to say. Out on the steppe nothing moves at all, and the silence is so deep and so wide that the watcher can hear the blood in his own ears, and the soft collapse of an ember in the hearth behind him sounds like an event. Inside the dwellings, the people are at their deepest. Their breathing has slowed, their heartbeats have slowed, their bodies banked down like the fires, the night's work of rest almost complete. This is the hour when, in the modern world, you might wake with a start and check a clock and feel dread at the number. Here there is no number. There is only the knowledge, as solid as the frozen ground, that this is the bottom of the curve, that the cold is doing this because dawn is near, that the worst hour and the most hopeful hour are, and have always been, the same hour. The watcher feeds both fires one last time, generously now, building them up for the waking. The east, if you watch the horizon long enough, is no longer quite black. It is the color of black remembering blue. Since the camp will wake soon after we leave it, let us look ahead, gently at the day that is coming for them, the ordinary tomorrow of an ice age winter, because there is something restful in knowing that tomorrow is already arranged, that it holds no surprises, that it is simply the next verse of the song. They will wake slowly in the gray light, the way people wake when no one has ever owned an alarm. The fires will be built up first, before anything, and the dwellings will warm while people lie in the furs a while longer, talking quietly, telling the dreams. Then the morning meal, warmed meat and broth and fat, rich and unhurried. The boots will be checked, the dried grass packed in, the outer furs shrugged on at the door. And then the day's small economy. 2 of the hunters will walk the trapline along the willow flats, checking the snares for hare and fox and ptarmigan, the quiet daily harvest that fills the gaps between big kills. The fisher will open her holes in the river ice and sit over them, patient as the owl. The grandmother will preside over the dwelling, sewing, rendering fat, minding the smallest children, ruling her warm kingdom. The flint will tick. Someone will haul bone for the fires. Someone will haul ice for the water. Someone will scrape a hide stretched on its frame, the long rhythmic strokes that turn raw skin into soft clothing, a sound like slow breathing. The children will erupt outside for as long as the cold allows and come back in glowing, with snow melting in their hair, with urgent news about Fox tracks. The light will slant gold and lower and go, and the fires will be banked, and the stories will start, and the furs will fill up with family, and the night will come around again, this same night, the one you are lying in now. Day after day, the same shape all winter. Not one of those days will be famous. No one will ever write them down. They are simply the days a small band of people kept each other warm and fed and amused at the bottom of an ice age, which is to say, they are quiet masterpieces, every one. And beyond tomorrow, beyond the string of tomorrows, there is the promise the watcher read in the rising stars, the one the whole winter leans toward. So before we rise out of this valley for the last time, come stand once more on the ridge above the camp and look at the frozen world, and let me tell you what this exact place looks like in 5 months, because the people sleeping below can see it with their eyes closed, and it is half of what keeps them warm. In 5 months the river will move. It goes suddenly, in a single thunderous day or two, the ice heaving and cracking and grinding downstream in flows the size of dwellings, a sound like the steppe clearing its throat, and every person in camp will come out and stand on the bank to watch it go, because no one ever gets tired of watching the river beat the winter. Then the brown weeks, the mud and trickle and patience. And then the steppe does the thing it does, the thing that no one who has wintered on it ever quite believes, even though it happens every year. It turns green and gold and purple almost overnight. The Thor lakes blaze blue and fill with thousands upon thousands of birds, geese and cranes, and swans pouring up from the south in skeins that take an hour to pass. The light stretches and stretches until the dark is just a brief blue pause, and the children cannot be made to sleep at all. The reindeer come pouring back through the valley with their new calves running at heel. The air, which all winter smelled of nothing but cold, smells of water and earth and willow and a million flowers with no one to name them. And the band will fold the winter away and walk out into all that light with the new babies and the year's new stories, and the bone houses will stand empty through the green months, keeping the hearths waiting, patient as skulls, for the wheel to bring their people home again. That is what the sleeping camp is dreaming toward under the snow tonight. Winter here was never a sentence to be endured. It was the held breath before that. One more thought, the last one, and it is for you because you are the other character in this story, the one lying warm at the far end of those 800 generations. You carry more of that camp than you know. When you feel the particular comfort of blankets while wind sounds outside, that is theirs. When you cannot help staring into a fire, any fire, a candle, even the looped video of a fireplace, and feel your thoughts slow and soften. That is the firelight settling you the way it settled them, an instinct worn into us by a million evenings of safety arriving with the flames. When you sleep better hearing another person breathing nearby, when a storm outside makes the bed feel better rather than worse, when you wake at 3 in the morning and the house is quiet and you feel, beneath any worry, a strange undertone of peace. All of that is the steppe in you, the bone house in you, the long human night that you have inherited and inhabit still. They had no word for insomnia, as far as we can tell, and perhaps that is the gift to take from them tonight. The night was never the enemy. The night was the camp's own country, watched over in shifts, warmed in heaps, filled with stories and embers and the breathing of family, and it took care of the people who lived in it, and it will take care of you. You do not have to do sleep well the way you have to do so much else. You only have to lie still in the warm dark, like everyone in that dwelling, like everyone in every dwelling since, and let the oldest routine there is carry you down. There is one place in this world we have not yet visited, and since this is a night for traveling without leaving the furs, let us make the journey no one in the band has ever made or ever will, because nothing they need lies in that direction. Let us go north to see the thing itself, the ice. Rise off the steppe and drift north, over the sleeping camp, over valley after frozen valley, the bone house camps growing scarcer beneath you and then stopping altogether. The land emptying into pure white silence. Days of distance pass below. The last stunted willows fall behind, and then far ahead the horizon does something wrong. It rises. A pale band stands across the entire north, from one edge of the world to the other, glowing faintly in the starlight, and as you drift closer it climbs and climbs until you have to look up at it. This is the southern face of the great ice sheet, and there is nothing in our modern experience to set beside it. A wall of ancient ice, blue-white and scarred, in places hundreds of meters high at its broken edge. And behind that edge it only thickens, rising for hundreds of kilometers into the interior until the ice lies 2 and 3 kilometers deep, deep enough to drown mountain ranges, so heavy that it presses the very bedrock of the continent down beneath it. A wound in the Earth's crust that is still, today, 20,000 years later, slowly springing back. The ice has its own weather. Cold air pours off its heights and rivers out across the land as wind, the same wind that leaned on the hide walls of the dwelling tonight. The band has never seen the ice, but they have felt its breath every winter night of their lives. And the ice is not silent, and it is not still. Stand before it at a respectful distance and listen. It groans, it cracks, sounds like distant thunder rolling along the face, the voice of unthinkable weight settling and shifting. It is moving, all of it, flowing outward and southward with terrible patience, meters in a year, grinding the land beneath it to flour, bulldozing hills, gouging the basins that will one day hold lakes with names like Superior and Ladoga. the landscape of half the modern world, the fjords, the lake countries, the rich flat farmlands of old glacial silt, is right now tonight being carved and ground and laid down under this ice. A finished gift that will not be unwrapped for 10,000 years. The people of the steppe live their whole lives in the shadow of this thing without ever seeing it, the way you might live your whole life on the slope of a quiet volcano. Now you have seen it for them. Turn south again, away from the wall and its cold breath, back toward the one thing in all that white immensity the ice has never once managed to put out. A spark of orange in a river valley. The camp. Hold on to it as you drift back down. The whole night has been about the distance between that wall and that spark, and the spark is winning. Back inside the warmth, with the cold of that journey still pleasantly imaginary on your skin, look one more time at the furs piled over the sleepers, because we have admired them all night without ever asking the obvious question. How is a stiff raw animal skin turned into something this soft, this warm, this durable? It is one of the oldest crafts our species possesses, and the grandmother of this dwelling is a master of it. And the answer, like so much on the steppe, is patience. A fresh hide, left alone, dries into something like a board. To become clothing, it must be worked. First the fleshing, the hide staked out or stretched on a frame of bone, and the inner surface scraped clean with those flint and bone scrapers that are everywhere on Earth, the single most common Ice Age tool, because this work never, ever ended. Then the dressing, and here is the detail that delights everyone who learns it. The finest traditional softening agent for a hide is the animal's own brain, worked warm into the skin, its natural oils and fats penetrating and coating every fiber, and by an odd generosity of nature, each animal carries almost exactly enough brain to tan its own hide. Then the breaking, hours and days of it, the hide pulled and stretched and worked back and forth over a stake or a taut cord, or simply between strong hands, again and again as it dries, never allowed to stiffen until the fibers give up and the skin turns soft as cloth. And finally, often the smoking, the hide tented over a low, smoldering fire of rotten wood, the smoke curing it golden brown and weatherproof, so that even if it soaks through, it will dry soft again. Weeks of work in every garment in this dwelling. The grandmother's hands have made hundreds. Run your mind over the back of her hands, asleep now, folded on the fur, and read them like the archaeologists read the bead lines at Sunghear. Every callus is a winter someone did not freeze. And because the best place to end a winter night's stories is in summer, let the camp's drowsing memory drift back one last time to the gathering. The great gathering of last summer at the lake 3 days east, the one the children have not stopped talking about since. 5 bands came, perhaps 150 people, more humans in one place than the children see in the rest of the year combined, a city by the standards of the steppe. A city of hide tents on a green shore under a sun that barely set. There was food in absurd plenty, fish from the lake, geese and eggs from the thaw ponds, the first berries. There was trade, the serious business folded inside the festival, fine flint from the southern outcrops moving north, black seashells moving inland, amber, ochre, ivory work, furs, and with the goods moved the news, 2 years of it, births and deaths and feuds and marvels. The gossip of 1,000 kilometers pooling at one lakeshore. There were the games. Spear thrower contests at marks, wrestling, foot races along the strand that the fisher's husband, the night watcher, won outright, a fact he has somehow worked into conversation all winter. There was music after the brief dusk, several flutes together, drums of stretched hide, 150 voices, dancing that the firelight chopped into flashes. The old people sat in rings and renewed friendships 40 years deep. The shamans, or the wise ones, or whatever this world called the people who tended its stories, traded songs and ceremonies the way the Napas traded flint. And the young people did what young people do at festivals. The teenage boy in our dwelling spent that whole gathering attempting to be casually magnificent within view of a girl from the Eastern Band. A girl who threw a dart better than he did. A fact he found devastating and unforgettable in equal measure. Nothing came of it yet. But the bands will gather again this coming summer at the same lake, and the boy knows it, and the girl 3 days east, asleep in her own family's furs tonight, perhaps knows it too. The net of the steppe was woven out of exactly this, 10,000 summers of it, glances across a fire, races on a shore. That is how 30 people in a frozen valley were never really 30 people. They were 150, 1,000, a whole golden lakeshore of allies carried through the winter as memory and promise. The gathering is months away still, but it is coming as surely as the dawn outside is coming and the camp sleeps toward both. Stay down here with them a little longer in the warm dark, and let the night do to you what it is doing to them. Notice how slow everything has become. The fire asks for fuel only once an hour now. The wind has settled into one long low note. Even the river ice has stopped its booming. The cold finished with its work for the night, everything contracted, everything still. The hours of an ice-age night are not counted. There is no midnight here, no 3 in the morning. No arithmetic of how much sleep remains, none of the small tyrannies we have built around the clock. There is only early night and deep night, and the turning of the stars past the smoke vent, and the slow rotation of the sleepers under the firs, and then in its own time the graying of the east. The night is not a corridor to hurry through. It is a place, and they live in it 1/3 of their lives, and they are at home in it. So be at home in it too. Let your breathing settle toward the pace of the breathing in that dwelling, long and slow and even. In the way the cold air slides down the smoke vent and warms. Out the way the smoke climbs into the stars. There is nothing the night needs from you. There is nothing left undone. The boots are drying by the fire. The water is made. The children are warm. The pits are full, and the net of friends is strong, and the bone walls have held for 100 winters and will hold tonight. While they sleep, let your mind pull back slowly like a camera rising, up through the smoke vent into the stunning cold, above the little cluster of glowing bone houses by the frozen river. From up here you can see how alone they are and how not alone. Days to the south, another smudge of smoke, another band, cousins. Beyond them, others, a chain of firelit camps strung thinly across the dark steppe from the Atlantic to the Pacific, each one a handful of sleeping people and one tended fire. Perhaps a few 100,000 human beings on the entire planet, holding on through the deepest cold of the age. And they did hold on. That is the quiet ending of this story. The last glacial maximum loosened its grip. Around 19,000 years ago, the ice sheets began their long retreat, and over thousands of years the world warmed, the seas rose and took back the land bridges. Forests marched north over the open steppe, and the mammoths dwindled with their grassland until on the mainland they were gone. The bone houses fell in and the earth folded over them, keeping the jawbones stacked exactly as careful hands had left them, waiting for a farmer's shovel 15,000 years later. But the people did not vanish with the mammoths. The people adapted as they always had. They followed the reindeer north, they settled the new river valleys, they learned the new forests, and they carried everything forward: the needle, the lamp, the flute, the stories, the habit of sleeping warm together through the dark. They carried it down 10,000 years to the first farmers, and the farmers carried it to the first cities, and the cities carried it, hand to hand, all the long way to a person lying comfortable in a warm bed, listening to a voice tell the story of a single winter night 20,000 years ago. You are descended from people who survived this. Every one of your direct ancestors made it through that cold, or you would not be here warm with your eyes closing. The watchful grandmother, the fire tender at 3 in the morning, the child asleep between two adults under a reindeer fur, some of them in a line too long to imagine, lead to you, so you can let go now. The fire is banked. The snow is deep against the walls. The wind has nothing it can do. Somebody is always half awake in the camp, the way somebody always was, so the night does not need you to watch it. Sleep the old way tonight. The first sleep first. The rest will take care of itself. Good night.